Everybody loves Monster Hunter, they just don't know it yet. If you're here and have never played a Monster Hunter game and have been wary about trying it, this is the sign for you to jump on now. There is no other game out there like it. Many others have tried, some to even some mild success, but nothing comes close to what Capcom has achieved with Monster Hunter. This series isn't just a fun, grindy game to dump hours into, a microtransaction haven for shareholders to milk, or a franchise that was once incredible, now on life support, clinging only to its hardcore fans. Because this franchise is the fun, grindy game to dump hours into, the best $60 and only $60 you'll ever spend, with a community that is ready to carry you through Fatalis as quickly as they are ready to scream at you for tripping them with the longsword. This is Monster Hunter, and it doesn't get better than this. Monster Hunter is a franchise that is very near and dear to my heart. It is one of those series that I've always said will be for me, that I will never make a video on it, as I would not turn my favorite video game into work. With the release of Wilds, I finally decided that I should make one video for this game. It's not often I get to talk about a game I truly adore. This video won't just be a chronicling of everything great about Monster Hunter World, but also my own little love letter to both World, Monster Hunter as a whole, and Capcom, as this series has been in my life longer than any other game franchise, especially one that I still play. But before we get there, we've got to take a step back just a bit before the release of World. Feel free to skip around, as I've labeled all the chapters for the different sections of this game. This video will have relevant footage played over, but can also be enjoyed as just a listening experience. So if you're like me and need something on a drive, doing dishes, or going to bed, play away. Monster Hunter before World was very interesting, only reaching a small market in the West, but booming in Japan. You can't turn a corner in Japan without seeing something Monster Hunter related. The franchise is as culturally significant to them as football is to Americans. The series has been around a long time. It is without a bad entry and has been released in the West, on Sony's most successful console in the PS2 at that, for its first 2 entries. So why hasn't it exploded in the West? Not only was there never a huge marketing push for the series in the West like World had, but a detail I think which really stifled the series' growth in the West is by the culture of the West. Japan enjoys a lot of handheld gaming, lots of third and shared spaces, with a public transit system that actually works. This led Capcom into leaning into their very own and surefire market, leading to Monster Hunter releases coming to handhelds with a pit stop on the Wii. And this, ironically enough, is where I jumped onto the Monster Hunter train. I had gotten a PSP for Christmas. I don't even remember asking for one. I had just had one all of a sudden. Then was doing the early aughts classic of walking around a GameStop, looking at game covers and backs, and making decisions solely based on that. I remember finding Monster Hunter Freedom 2 and was enamored with the Longsword and Tigrex. Writing this now, I am realizing why Longsword was my first ever and continual main for 4 Monster Hunter generations, and why Tigrex will always be my GOAT! He was my first ever wall that took me weeks, and forced me to really learn armor builds, attack openings, and my weapon. I feel every Monster Hunter player will find that wall that really forces them to learn how to play. But before I ever got that chance, I actually was one of those people that gave up on Monster Hunter, and not for the reason you might think. So I got it, took it home, and stopped playing it after 1 hour. I was only 10 at the time and didn't know how to climb in the snowy mountains, and put the game down for not being able to progress. Maybe less than a year later, I'm reading through the manuals of all my games, because those used to be a thing, and came across Monster Hunters, and got to the controls section and discovered, oh, is how you climb. Threw that back in and blew my ass out, realizing there were more than 2 areas to the snowy mountains. Thus began my journey into Monster Hunter, with the goal of facing down the cover monster and figuring out how to craft that dope longsword on the cover and in the trailer cutscene. To my dismay, when I learned that the bone katana wolf was kinda trash, but where are my devil slicer boys at? I put over 200 hours into Monster Hunter Freedom 2, until I realized there was an expansion in Freedom Unite. This is where boys become men. If you're a Freedom Unite vet, let me know in the comments below. There wasn't a Monster Hunter game that was nearly as punishing as trying to solo hub G-Rank quests in Freedom Unite, or the 4 Spires from Nekot's quests. And if you don't know what the hell I just said there, that's just something we're gonna have to work through together. 1,000 hours later in Freedom Unite, I then learned that there's already a Monster Hunter tryout for the Wii that I had to get my hands on, and so on. For some reason as a kid, I never knew there was a new Monster Hunter until a bit after they came out. I loved the franchise so much that I bought a 3DS and a Switch just for 4U and GU, and have now got a tattoo of Tigrex on me for this love. No other franchise has taken so many hours of my life or stuck with me this long. But loving Monster Hunter wasn't easy. She's a cruel mistress that demands a lot of you. But when it clicks and you find Monster Hunter's G-spot, I guess Master Rank spot, it is the most rewarding experience gaming has to offer. But getting into Freedom 2? The game was difficult, cumbersome, and unintuitive. What the hell is a tutorial? Never heard of her. How do I craft this really important item that'll get the fish out of the water so it can hyperspace tackle my ass? Probably shouldn't fight it anyway if I value my sanity. Without a wiki by your side as a first-time player in these early games, you were at a severe disadvantage, with the combination of internet help not being exactly what it is today. The three factors of atypical platforms, huge barrier to entry, and a severe lack of marketing created a momentous task to get any new players into the franchise, especially here in the West. I have still yet to get many of my friends into the game, even with the World and Wilds editions for onboarding. But that's not to say Capcom didn't go the extra mile for player onboarding with World, and it's the best it's ever been. And the push started immediately with the distinct direction Capcom took with the marketing of Monster Hunter World to the West. This huge new push all started with the announcement trailer. I even remember when the trailer dropped feeling very confused by it all. I, along with everyone else, clocked the Greatsword but was so unsure about if it even was truly the next Monster Hunter game. We just couldn't believe one would ever look this good, let alone come to mainstream consoles. And eventually came Rathalos to confirm exactly what we were witnessing, and it was electric. But also, many fans were worried. This didn't feel like Monster Hunter. Going as far to maybe call it a spinoff, that they were going to lose their identity trying to cater to a Western audience, and moving to an open world would kill the series. Incredible that each and every single one of these woes were addressed and squashed by release. A quick aside, everything in that first trailer is actually in-game. How often does an announcement trailer not only deliver on everything in it, but also improve it? Take notes, Ubisoft. Back to the announcement and subsequent footage. Bringing in a giant T-Rex looking motherfucker is perfect for familiarizing new players to this game. I understand big sword, swing at big dino. Got it. You start losing me at veiny penis monster that discharges. Regardless, this, along with all the weapon overviews, painted a very clear and interesting picture of just what exactly to expect with Monster Hunter World. Then throw in a completely free demo to try out the game to really get a chance to see how different it is from the old entries, and all of the new improvements was icing on the cake. Old players got to see all the shiny new toys and the new open world maps, and players who tried out older games but never got into it got to realize that, hey, this is so much smoother an experience than the last games. Maybe this one is him. And they were correct. Monster Hunter World was most definitely him. Very clearly setting the new baseline for what a Monster Hunter game is. Monster Hunter World quickly became Capcom's #1 most sold game at 28 million copies, including Iceborne Master Edition. And this wasn't a feat that just marketing alone could achieve. The word of mouth around World was electric. Anyone and everyone who tried it let everyone know just how incredible and special it was. Until Wilds, there is nothing else like it. I count Rise as its own thing, and I imagine we will continue to see further gulfs between what a handheld Monster Hunter and home console Monster Hunter is. But World was different, and was going to make a statement and redefine just exactly what a Monster Hunter game is, and they started with that damned perfect title, World. Not just the connected world and their maps, the world feeling the most alive and lived in as it ever has, the focus on ecosystems and narrative, moment-to-moment gameplay, and most importantly, our world. Monster Hunter World was literally built to bring our entire world into the fold. This just wasn't Japan's pet game that funny weebs in the West played to feel like they had a personality. With the addition of SOS, home consoles, modern features, it was time for the world to experience Monster Hunter together for the first time like they never had before. He sure took his time getting to talk about the actual game, didn't he? Yes, I did. Not only do I think the context going into the release of this game is important to understanding its grandeur, but also my experience and relationship with it to have your confidence that I know what the hell I'm talking about when I say that Monster Hunter World is in the Hall of Fame for best video game releases to ever grace our screens. Don't worry, the glazing will continue until morale improves, or until more people buy this game in Wilds. All of this preamble to finally lead us into Monster Hunter World, the game that ushered in a new kingpin to the gaming sphere and brought many of us to the new world. We open in World with us figuratively and literally leaving everything we know about Monster Hunter behind and traveling to the new world. No better jumping on point for players than being an A-lister, but in a brand new space. Our hunter, along with the new players, are learning how everything works together for the first time. This opens up a very natural avenue for tutorializing everything, and even for returning players. There's a lot of new changes here in World, and it can and will be overwhelming, especially considering the Ancient Forest is the first map we embark on. But let's back up a bit and talk about our hunter. The character creator is the best that Capcom has made for a Monster Hunter game. I've never been able to look so pretty and make exactly the character I wanted before. Capcom is leading the industry in character creators, and to think Monster Hunter isn't even the final form of this. We got Dragon's Dogma 2 to thank for that credit. But it's the customizability that helped me form such a strong connection with my hunter. Instead of me playing this badass, I felt like this badass. Add on the simple, but for me, huge addition of hiding helmets, and I was hooked, ready for the fashion hunting. With our new waifu hunter, a new world, and handler. What the hell is this? Yes, we get a buddy companion that the fan base is split on, who joins us throughout the entire game. I really love the addition of a handler, even if I don't personally love the way that she was written. It seems Capcom has learned from this with how they're approaching handlers in Wilds, but I still love the world building of it. A hunter is the perfect physical specimen for tackling the monsters head on, and the handler handles all the bureaucracy and research of hunting. We're the brawn and they're the brain, and the two together create an unbeatable dynamic for taking on the challenges of the new world. And if we're going to take on these challenges, we're going to need a base of operations, right? The hub in the Monster Hunter game is just as important as the maps, monsters, and gameplay. Everybody has a favorite and is integral to a good Monster Hunter experience. Poke Village will always be the GOAT to me, but basically anything that was good in your childhood is going to be the best thing ever. I digress. Astera brought about the biggest scale to a hub we've ever seen, to its benefit and detriment. Visually, it is staggering. Seeing the Gathering Hub towering over the trade yard is impressive. Repurposing the ships used to sail over to the New World shows the resourcefulness and resilience of this group. Though it is impressive to look at, there is the tiny issue many of us have with too much running around. The trade yard is a bit too out of the way from the canteen and workshop, in addition to everything being a bit too spread out. These criticisms were perfectly addressed in Iceborne and even more so in Rise. Astera, though, feels like a second home to me. Celiana is what I think of anymore when considering World, but Astera will always bring me right back to 2018. It is what I think about when I think of the new world. Celiana is where I go when I consider Black Dragons and decoration farming. Celiana is my gaming hub, but Astera is my hub for new world immersion. And let's talk about that new world. Capcom has stated many times that World is the closest they've ever gotten to making the Monster Hunter game that they've always envisioned the series being. Now, that's not exactly true, as things kind of changed whenever they jumped to home consoles, but I won't get into that. Finally, being unshackled from lackluster hardware and having the bandwidth to play with, they were free to expand what a Monster Hunter game could be, besides just a boss rush. There is so much more to do and see in these spaces. No longer are the areas just mini boss arenas, but finally a living, breathing ecosystem. Ecosystem was the goal for World. The monsters have never been further from their namesake. They are creatures that inhabit these lands, roaming around, looking for food, feuding with other monsters, napping, marking their territory. All of these things happening with every monster on the map at once without loading screens. That last bit being the most important to bringing that level of immersion that wasn't there before, of which was the largest improvement and change to Monster Hunter, I'd say. I didn't know how I was going to work with the sectioned nature of maps being so important to the feel and flow of the game, but they pulled it off, still maintaining boss arenas while never feeling like so. These spaces are beautifully woven into the map design as a whole that you never really noticed until hundreds of hours. A big byproduct of this is no more dipping into another area to heal. A monster will chase and chase and chase you, to the point that you may run into another monster and now you're stuck between two beasts who hate each other just as much as they hate you. The flow and emergence of it all is what makes the hours just fly by. Monster Hunter has a way of making one fast travel in real life, and that's a compliment. I love just disappearing into Monster Hunter for an afternoon and forgetting about all my troubles. Whether I'm in the Elder's Recess hating my life against lava fish, playing in the deep, immersive snow of the Hoarfrost, or getting lost in the ancient forest, even though I'm creeping on 2,000 hours in this game. Seriously, how the fuck do I still not know my way around here? I find the ancient forest so interesting, as it's the most complicated and unique of the maps. Feels like Capcom created this space to prove to us and themselves that these new maps were going to be dense. And that sentiment carried. Or just the map. The rest feel like the older games with proper connective tissue to remove loading screens, but still, Ancient Forest was the floor, and it was only up from there. The other maps also have the variety of things to do in them. There are NPCs, other creatures, side quests to find down the maps. We finally have actual reasons to embark on expeditions now, where before it was just better to target whichever monster we needed to hunt. But maybe you just want to go endemic life collecting, find the local Grimalkine tribe, or just watch the monsters graze. I hate to say the cliche, but World finally feels alive. The two maps that really give off this feeling is ironically the Rotten Vale and aptly the Coral Highlands. One is teeming with life and the other also thriving amidst the decay. Normally in a Monster Hunter game, we get the 4 classic archetypes: forest, snow, volcano, and desert, with a special one mixed in that's just a small branch of these options. But World brings in completely fresh biomes. The Coral Highlands had my jaw on the floor when it first released. Finding a way to make a coral reef playable above ground is just incredible. There's nothing else like it in Monster Hunter, and it's just a beauty to look at, hands down my favorite. But even more unique than that is the Rotten Vale, a place where monsters go to die. Built upon and inside of a massive skeleton of Dalamdur, with a hazardous bog and life that finds a way to take advantage of this decay, like Valhazak and Odogaron. And these two places are independent of one another. It's because of the fertilizer that the Rotten Vale provides that the Coral Highlands above is able to sprout and thrive the way it does. Yes, for those of you that don't know, the Coral Highlands exist just above the Rotten Vale. The maps here are the best they've ever been, and there's no sugarcoating that fact. You'd be forgiven if you didn't believe this is the game that followed for you. Surely, there were a couple others on the PS3 that built up the year. Hell no! Capcom really popped out and showed us. It speaks to the confidence and passion that they have with this series to make such a bold leap. They could have just stopped here, honestly, and the game still would have been incredible. And then polishing 4U's gameplay in this environment would have made me happy, but they didn't stop there. They kept pushing, and that's what brings us to the stars of this game. Actual monsters that fill out this world. What I love about Capcom with these Monster Hunter games is that they are not satisfied to rest on their laurels. World's base roster was almost 2/3 new monsters, with the returning cast being classics like Rathalos, Teostra, and Diablos. They could for sure get away with just updating old monsters and bringing them into the current generation. But why? They'll come eventually in title updates. But seriously, every new monster besides Stupid Fish have already become classics in my mind. The chicken that comes in and flashes you, chainsaw fish, okay, not a classic, but why does nobody talk about the fact that this boy's making chainsaw sounds? And let us not forget the true classic star of World, Odogaron. A monster's popularity is a combination between its fight and the gear it grants. Odo checked both boxes masterfully, granting some of the most statistically and aesthetically desirable gear. The new B-52 bomber to take the place of Devilshow for being the biggest piece of shit in the game, always popping up to ruin our day. That's cool. The new additions found in Base World, some might argue, were a bit on the safe side and lack variety, with many monsters sharing the same skeleton and the overwhelming majority being fire monsters. But I liked it, and monsters didn't need to knock our socks off in the design department. They needed to work in harmony with the world Capcom has created, which leads me to the king of harmony, Nergigante. My absolute favorite Elder Dragon. Likely for the same reason Tigrex is my all-time favorite monster. Absolute power. Nergi is the first Elder Dragon to have no element attached to him. His element is pure strength, and will body you if you even look at him funny. I love how his fight has no tricks, no stupid flame shield that melts you, no Ebola that forces you to slap miasma jewels, or tornadoes that you swear you weren't in their hitbox. Just spiky muscle. And for that, I respect the hell out of him and fell in love with this fight. Being the flagship of World, I'd say they nailed it, especially with him being one of the few elders to get the title of flagship. Shame he's not on the box art for the Western release, but I suppose Rathalos is fine being the franchise flagship. And what I really love about him is what he represents in the story. And thematically, he is just us, a hunter trying to create balance in the ecosystem. He really is the hero of the story, even all the way into Iceborne, and I appreciate even in the DLC they kept him as a through line. Maybe I need a Nergi tattoo, and when people ask what the spiky mass on my body means, I can stone cold stare at them and just say, balance, and not even be lying. But if you want to talk about the opposite of balance, we've got Zura Magdaros. Narratively and thematically, Nergigante's foil. I'm sure you know what I'm going to say about him, so I won't spend much time with him. The spectacle was awesome for the first time. Giant siege fights like this is very difficult to make engaging. Shooting cannons and hitting magma cores gets pretty dull after the second time. Thankfully, Capcom knew this and didn't make Zora or his gear a big part of any grinding. Hell, they just made his gear grindable from Astral Rank and the Guiding Lands. But big Godzilla-esque monster is awesome. And boring. I do think Capcom is making strides for ginormous monster fights to be more fun and engaging. Rise especially did well with Guys Magorm and Narwhal, and I hope to see improvements in WoWs for the big-ass monster category, but for now, we're just going to have to wait and see. And of course, with Zora, we gotta talk about this game's secret final boss, like all Monster Hunter games have, Xeno'jiiva. This thing is as alien and freaky as we've ever gotten. This monster really just exists to finally sate the unending desire to hunt baby monsters as we kick the shit out of this newborn. Xeno is about as big as a monster can really get, with it still feeling like an actual fight, and for what it is, I enjoy it. And with this monster being here, it kind of excuses the Zora issues, as this is the true big monster of the game. The new monsters are great, and I loved all of them. But how do you go about bringing existing monsters into the new generation while still retaining their identity? World saw this challenge as an opportunity to really refine and update our older monsters to their final form, for lack of a better word, or completely gutting them and making a totally unique fight for them. Looking at you, Lunastra, Alatreon, and Fatalis. But even beyond the base roster, subspecies have the biggest gulf between it and its counterpart than ever. Azure Wrath is a flying bastard that make me want to headbutt a nail gun as a dual blades main. Pink Rathian is actually a challenge with her upped aggression, and Black Diablos needs a Zanny. Bringing all these monsters up to speed was quite masterfully done. Anytime I think of these monsters anymore, I think of these versions, and that's a big fucking bing bong if you ask me. Now, the base roster for World was quite tiny and limited by skeletons. We all know this. So after about 200 to 300 hours, it did leave us wanting more. That brings us to the title updates. World was billed somewhat as the first live service Monster Hunter game. Sure, previous games had event quests and such, but this is the first one with legitimate title updates, content drops, login rewards, and timed events. It was a little weird getting used to it in a Monster Hunter game, and a bit scary as this could be a slippery slope to microtransaction hell. But Capcom and more likely Ryozo stuck to their guns for not selling out Monster Hunter harder than a YouTuber taking money from BetterHelp. The events and updates, I believe, really brought the community together and gave us more reasons to log back in after finishing our endgame sets in base world. Which brings me straight to Cole of Taroth. A very daring idea, and a somewhat answer to how to handle siege monsters. Cole of Taroth has a lot of good and a lot of bad. Let's get the bad out of the way now. RNG weapons, with far too low of drop rates, and that are best in class. Either up the drop rates or make them lateral upgrades to existing in-game gear. Iceborne did fix this a bit with melding, and Safi's Siege more so with targeted weapon drops, but both still feel bad to grind for after the 20th run. Outside of that, I think Cold and Safi, more on that in the Iceborne section, is a fantastic step in the right direction. Having 16 hunters all quote-unquote fight the same monster is a really exciting prospect, and is one of the things that makes siege hunts awesome. Yes, we are only together in the sense of a shared health pool, not 16 players in one instance, but it's close enough to really bring together community. Having a streamer host a lobby of 15 other hunters, all to progress and take down one big-ass monster is so freaking cool. I didn't get into the Cole of Safi grind until after over 1,000 hours because I was a boomer who thought it was too confusing. After giving it a chance, I can finally say I get it, and can hope and pray that Capcom continually iterates on this idea in Wilds, because this, with some mechanics from Rampages, are the future for siege hunts. Base Monster Hunter World is already a goated-ass game, with enough content to put hundreds of hours into. Grinding out cold weapons, stream stones, decos. It'll take you quite a long time to perfect your build, which I somewhat appreciate, as I'm never truly done with a Monster Hunter game until I can't squeeze out one bit of optimization in my build. I'll be discussing the in-game grind of both World and Iceborne in the gameplay section of this video. And even after that, I'm still probably going to hunt some more, help out friends, or join OSOS flares to help out random hunters. And right when you think you're done with the game, you find out there's an expansion coming out that is almost as big as the base game itself, so you decide to replay the game leading up to it and really get to appreciate the story. Bet you didn't think we were going to go there in a Monster Hunter game, did you? Before we delve into Iceborne, I want to talk a bit about the story, because right next to For You, this game tried its damnedest to have one, since apparently to appeal to a Western market, you need one of those. Nobody tell FromSoft. And so, the story. I'm going to be lumping in Iceborne with Worlds, as even with both of them combined, there still isn't much to talk about. This is still a Monster Hunter game after all. With World, we actually have a story with voice-acted cutscenes and characters to kind of start caring about. We've got our handlers, the commander, field team leader, huntsman, and lastly the admiral. By the end, you really get to know these people, and Capcom is able to foster a greater sense of us being a part of a greater whole. For once, it feels like we are a part of the commission instead of being the commission. Let's not forget to mention Ace Cadet, who came over to the new world with us. I love the little detail of his gear improving as we move through the ranks, and he's the one there with us to tackle Fatalis. We aren't the only badass in these parts. Wild seems to be taking another step in granting characters greater focus, as they all are now named, and taking a bigger focus in the marketing. But, story. What does World and Iceborne offer up? It's a bit of a recontextualization, for a lack of a better term. We've always known that the hunter isn't out there to make all monsters extinct, and we only put down elder dragons as they become big threats. But World and Iceborne made it an explicit theme of their stories. Coming into World, we are an A-lister hunter brought over to investigate the Elder's Crossing, and what it all means. Before we get into that, we are tasked with securing Astera. All of our assigned quests of hunting monsters are due out of necessity for protection. We are slowly trying to expand our investigation and continually become inhibited by monsters, thus forcing us to take them down to further our own needs. We never kill a monster in the main story unless we absolutely have to, which is interesting as a big theme for the Commission is creating balance with the ecosystem. Yet our arrival directly causes imbalances as we force our way into these environments unnaturally. The overarching theme of all Monster Hunter games have been humanity's battle with staving off the natural world. I mean, hell, that's all human existence has been, and after we've done that, there's another part of humanity that must be satisfied, that being curiosity. We just can't help ourselves figuring out how the world works around us. It's both our blessing and curse as conscious beings. This is all highlighted throughout Worlds and Iceborne's story. In Base World, our goal is to redirect Zora Magdaros before he Godzilla nukes all we've built in Astera, and the new world. Zora was supposed to go to the Vale to die, but was being drawn by Xeno in the Elder's Recess. So us being scared, try and step in, and every time we're there, so is Nergigante. He is the natural world's hunter. He was the one meant to slay Xeno because it was about to cause ecological collapse, and by repelling and taking him out, we have upset the natural order of things, and thus must take his place in the food chain, redirecting Zora and slaying Xeno. Both of these achieve the goal of living in harmony with the ecosystem and satisfying our own curiosity. It's a delicate balancing act that can go too far, and if we do go too far, then the ecosystem sends something to correct us. I'll talk about him in a bit. By the end of the world, we are given this stone that basically represents, hey, we know what's up, and we are the arbiters of balance in the ecosystem, go us. And that's where Iceborne's story steps in. Iceborne's story, in classic Monster Hunter fashion, kind of retreads the same story as the last time, but instead of Zora nuking the world, Velkhana will freeze it over. So we gotta deal with the beautiful bitch to find out the old Everworm thing is making earthquakes or something. Fearing this possible calamity, we investigate and locate it. Once arriving, we find Nergigante again, just like we kept seeing him with Zora. Kill him, because he's the problem, right? And then go on to fight Shara. We, quote-unquote, defeat Shara, only to see it resurrect. This part is a bit weird as the cutscene is built as if we are not able to take down Shara, but like, we just did and we've got the whole gang with us here this time. But sure, I'll roll with it. This is insurmountable, and we cannot defeat Shara. And then Nergigante shows up, killing Shara and almost giving us a knowing look, as to prove his vital role in the balance of the ecosystem. That he was only hostile to us because we were interfering with his work on balancing the ecosystem. Now that Shara is gone, he has no reason to attack us and flies away. This beat helps the Commission realize that it isn't up to them to balance the natural world, that humanity isn't all-knowing, and that curiosity can lead to hubris and calamity, which is exactly what happened to the old civilization at Castle Shrade. Just like Xeno and Shara has a monster that calls them when they threaten to throw the ecosystem out of balance, humanity has their own Nergigante, called Fatalis. The monster itself doesn't have a true name. It was named so after Castle Shrade was destroyed in the now coined term Fatalis event. The Kingdom of Shrade had become so large that it was affecting the ecosystem. Monsters were disappearing, earthquakes, elder dragons acting strange. Sounds quite familiar, right? That's when Fatalis stepped in to make it right. Fatalis is viewed as a vengeful god to the people of Monster Hunter, with ultimate unmatched power, and it's to be expected. As we learned in World and Iceborne's story, the world will correct itself. The funny thing is, Fatalis showed up from a long domino effect set in place with our actions in Base World. With destroying Nergigante, it was up to us to upkeep on culling Xenogivas. Seems we failed that task, so it matured into Safi cue Elatrion to come into the secluded valley to destroy the Red Dragon's troublesome presence. Us being scared little humans killed the Master of Elements Black Dragon, thus luring out the god of all monsters. If humanity is killing black dragons and meddled with the ecosystem's food chain to rise to the very top of it, while not doing the best job, it's time for a reset. It's why Ace Cadet's line hits so hard when you fight him for the first time. Time to fight history. Fatalis has always been a myth. A myth that the might of the Fifth Fleet was able to draw out. I love the through line thematically with World's story of humanity's struggle to find its place in the natural world's food chain. Yeah, the unskippable cutscenes and moment-to-moment dialogue isn't impressive, but when you take a step back to look at it all, I think it's perfect for a game like this, and I love it. I bet you didn't expect this much to be said about the game's story, and honestly, when I started this section, I didn't anticipate it either. We've covered a lot so far, and still haven't properly entered into Iceborne, which is incredible, and why World is one of the best games created for me. So let's confirm its greatness and dive into Iceborne. Introducing Master Rank. So long G Rank, as that's weird and too Japanese for us gun-toting Americans to understand, and I think it's a fine change. The G always stood for words like great or guts, and if you're really fancy, I like to call it gangster rank. But master rank makes sense too. I remember when I booted up Iceborne for the first time, I was not ready for the difficulty spike. This is par of the course for all G rank expansions, but little boy forgot. I welcomed the increased challenges. Many of us thought base world was a bit too easy, which is also par of the course for a Monster Hunter game. Between difficulty and story expectations, I'm really surprised by Monster Hunter. But for me, that's to its benefit. It's a cozy game, as much as it's also the most heart-pumping time when trying to take down Alatreon or Fatalis for the first time. But before we get to them, we gotta talk about where it started. Chainsaw Fish. Jumping into Iceborne, we get the beautiful Hoarfrost Reach. I'm a freaking sucker for snow biomes in any game. For the longest time as a kid, I would always make my wallpaper some kind of snowiness. The Hoarfrost, just like any other map design, follows a very bottom-to-top design. You may notice in every other map, barring the Rotten Vale, as its progression is flipped, the higher you go up on the map, the stronger the monsters get until you reach the map's apex. I love the snowiness of the lower areas, where the air is cooler and how things freeze over the higher elevation you get. Even when this expansion came out in 2019, I was blown away by the tessellation found in the snow, and just graphically in general. Pause on the Reach. I've got to mention it and found no better place too. The presentation and graphics of World is astounding. Even after 8 years, this game still looks like it was released this year. They pulled out some type of wizardry to make this run on a PS4. Back in the good old days of optimization, am I right? We're going to ignore the PC port for now. Whether it is the dense maze of the ancient forest or the warm glow of the Elder's Recess, it all still impresses. And since I can't find another place to mention it, I'm gonna lump in music here as well. World and Iceborne seriously brought in some of the most iconic music for the franchise. This is the first game to have a main theme outside of Proof of a Hero that I remembered. This and the main Astera theme had me humming them all the time, even to this day. I love all the different places you can find these motifs, whether it be completing a quest or a big milestone. And I've got to point out my all-time favorite track of this game. Super creatively titled Second Council Meeting Tension from Iceborne's OST. Just take a second to listen to it. It goes so hard. The monster themes are also fantastic. Another standout being the large monster theme for the Rotten Vale. You'd be forgiven if you thought it was a Doggeron's theme, and I imagine it will be going forward with other games. It fits him so well. Here's hoping we see him return in Wilds in some fashion. World really impresses with its commitment to motifs and music that you'd think Howard Shore came on the project to assist. Love this OST and listened to the entire time writing this script. Anyways, back to Iceborne. The Hoarfrost added the option to bring about monster types that were sorely needed. Ice types. Even Rise had a hard-on for fire monsters. Having Bombaro and Beatodos bring us into the Reach really sells the theme of Iceborne. But outside of them, Iceborne focuses on bringing in subspecies and returning monsters, which I don't mind at all, as they brought in my boy, the GOAT, the King Tigerex. And with his skeleton, we got his cousins Nargacuga and Barioth. Talk about Barioth in a second. Other notable additions were the first returner of the Fated Four in Glavenus, and Mike Dyson himself, Brachythioth. There was a much larger focus on this roster being Master Rank, having a much tougher power curve, I feel. It's not long until we're taking on what I deem real monsters, and I appreciate that. I never really enjoy the slog of hunting all the little babies when starting a new rank. But we gotta talk about the elephant in the room, Barioth. This motherfucker was designed to be a check against players. The first real monster and challenge of Iceborne. If you couldn't deal with him, then you had no chance with the rest of the expansion. Not only did he check that you've been leveling up your gear, but also that you've upped your skills. He's crazy fast for his size, can leap around the arena without a second thought, and Ice Blight has got to be one of the worst of the blights. I remember this dude being my first wall in all of World, followed by Velkhana, who in her very own right is an incredible monster. Velkhana is our flagship for Iceborne, and boy does she not disappoint. Going in the completely opposite of Nergigante, we've got a Mistress Master of Ice, creating new terrain to battle around, freezing the air above you to drop spikes, and a tail that I wish I could cut off more of, because fuck that thing. The fight is very difficult when going in blind, but slowly becomes one of the most fair, fun Elder Dragons to fight for me. Alatreon seems to have taken a page out of her book for fights that truly feel turn-based. Everything she does leaves a juicy opening for you to take your turn, and then let her go. It's a beautifully paced fight that only gets edged out by Alatreon's. But before we get to talk about him, I guess we should mention the secret final boss. Shara Ishvelda is a freak. All I'm saying. The way it stares directly into the camera, the player, It's sinewy exposed muscles, wings that definitely don't let it fly. It's a really fun final boss. Taking the skeleton of Xeno'jiiva to ensure the spectacle, its vibration-based attacks almost match Xeno in the sense of them being as unnatural as monsters get. Most monsters are rooted in some type of reality or believable biology, but not these guys. We've got alien lasers in The Last Airbender. This dude used to kick my ass all the time, taking me upwards to 20 to 25 minutes to take down. Though he was a fitting enough final boss to Iceborne, he wasn't truly the final task. And I'm going to keep you on the hook for that, because we can't talk about the Black Dragons without mentioning Safi-Jiiva. I'll make this one quick, as this video is already way longer than I expected it to be. Safi-Jiiva is just better Cold Throw, but still needs some work. I'm still digging the 16-player lobbies, the shared health pool, and the random drop weapons are far better than it was with Kolv. The fight itself feels more like a fight than Kolv, introducing goals that make you think twice about your party's weapon comp, a la Behemoth, which I think is great. Creates diversity in hunters and asks more of us in the preparation department before tackling. After defeating him, whatever weapon you brought into the final phase is guaranteed to drop, and at pretty decent rates to get what you want. The grind was shifted to something more Monster Hunter, which was Dracolite. Using the material gained every hunt to power up weapons felt infinitely better than killing Kolv and praying. You knew that after every hunt you were making assured progress. Its armor as well feels like it really inspired the team on Rise to go crazy with armor set bonuses like Berserk, Furious, or Dereliction. I really ended up enjoying Safi and the awakening aspect of his weapons. Giving another thing to grind for makes Monkey Brain happy. But before we get to the payoff of this grinding, let's mention where we do our preparing for one of the hardest fights. Celiana is a direct reaction to Astera. Capcom heard our complaints and addressed all of them, centralizing everything and putting them all basically on top of each other. No more running around everywhere to check on things. There are little corridors that connect every place you may need to go, and it just makes between hunt maintenance a breeze. And it should be, because you're going to spend a lot of time here in Celiana, whether it's crafting new gear, taping down R2 for the Steamworks, melting 800 cold weapons, or preparing for the best fight in the world. Alatreon, a fight that kicked the ever-living dog out of me for quite a long time. A fight I would have to hype myself up for every time I went into it. A fight that forced all of us to create a build around it just to take it down. And I'm not talking about bringing an elemental weapon. I was over here bringing blight resistance, evade extender, part breaker, all types of skills people label comfort to get a survival edge to take down Alatreon. Eschaton Judgment has been billed as a cheap and lame mechanic that is artificial difficulty. Yes, I get the argument that a fight should be difficult in the merits of its moment-to-moment combat. That's what we got Fatalis for. But this fight was a test of a hunter's preparation. You know, those things that so many people complained about that World took away from Monster Hunter? You need to know the right weapon and skills to bring, when to go for the legs to seal Eschaton, and when to attack the head to break horns. All of this on top of the moves that hits like a truck, but is also very, very fair. Alatreon is as turn-based as a fight gets. It doesn't move around like a traditional monster once you start to recognize the patterns. It'll position itself to do one move, reset, and then the next. Just about every move that Alatreon does is big and flashy that leaves a window open for attack. And even if you are hit by an attack, you nearly always have enough time to stand up and pop a max potion. Recognizing when it's your turn and how long the window is for your weapon is paramount to success against Alatreon. It's this back and forth XCOM dance that has taken her from my absolute hardest mountain to climb to my favorite fight to casually hunt. What has not become casual and fun for me at all is God himself, Fatalis. This is a bad man that commands respect every time you fight him. Unless you're some god at Monster Hunter, Fatalis is a boy you cannot underestimate, as 1 or 2 attacks and you're done. This was everyone's final mountain to climb, and was the perfect way to cap off Iceborne and World. All the new players and old got to experience the pinnacle of Monster Hunter lore and difficulty. There are still players out there who love World but couldn't defeat Fatalis and had to find acceptance in that. A monster so difficult that it raised conversations on how hard is too hard, and should all content be accessible to the entire player base. And I say no. He is the post-game final boss. That is like asking if Sephiroth in Kingdom Hearts 2 should be accessible to everyone. It's silly. Before Alatreon and Fatalis, you could easily skate by on hella healing items and grit. Raging Brachydios and Fierce Rajang might have something to say about that, but you get my point. He's the ultimate challenge, and if you can defeat him, you should be super proud of yourself. I cheered so loud when I beat him for the first time, with only seconds to spare. Oh yeah, seconds to spare. The 30-minute timer is silly, but I get it. Any monster would be clearable easily with a 50-minute timer. Just go slow and steady and you'll get it. The 30-minute timer puts pressure on the player to get it done. No holding back, because Fatalis won't. Oh, and if you don't break his horn, you might as well have just lost the fight. It's Eschaton Judgment, but since it doesn't insta-kill you, no one complained about it. All these things together make for the complete Monster Hunter challenge that I love. The simplicity of it all after the hoops from the Elatrion fight make it all the more sweet. Just you and your weapon against him and his fire. No tricks, no BS, just mono-y-mono. Oh, and his gear is pretty sweet too. Does it make all other armor redundant? Maybe, but you've already cleared Fatalis. You're pretty much done with the game anyway. It's victory lap armor. Because the only other challenge after Fatalis is Arch-Tempered Volcana, and to be honest, I still haven't beat her because fuck all that. There is no reason she should have more health than Fatalis. That's just silly. Regardless, I love both of these final fights for Iceborne, and there truly couldn't have been a better way to top off this perfect game. Oh, what's that? Decorations are random drops, and the final area is colloquially called the grinding lands, and you have to have a friend or spend hours of your life changing levels of areas and grinding them to get all the materials you name, and you're calling this game perfect? Yeah, I wanted to save gameplay in the endgame for the last, as it's definitely the most controversial part of Monster Hunter World. Before we talk about the endgame grind and the bungling of decorations, we've got to talk about gameplay improvements. This is the first Monster Hunter generation where there was no new weapon introduced. Instead, what we received was massive reworks and updates to current weapon movesets. Going forward, these would represent the new base that all future games would build on for Monster Hunter. I am completely okay with this. As much as I would have loved a new weapon or two, the reality is that 14 weapons is already plenty, and it would be quite hard to find another niche to fill for a weapon to stand out as unique. I know Frontier has the Tonfas and Magna Spikes, which are neat, but like, that's Frontier. That game is batshit, alright? Pile on the additions with Iceborne for new moves and the Clutch Claw to Minnie's dismay, I'd say we come out well ahead versus if they just added a new weapon. Every single weapon was consensually touched in some way to improve it, and with some weapons redefined them. Greatsword got the true charge slash, Switch Axe got the zero-sum discharge, and Longsword just is Capcom's favorite weapon. Bowguns and Bow had a huge facelift as well, finally transitioning to their true third-person shooter controls. I imagine having a guaranteed stick for camera movement helped a lot. And let me mention that quickly. Something that doesn't get a lot of praise in gaming is good camera controls and movement, because when it's done well, it's invisible. Capcom makes it look so effortless, the way it'll respond to your commands, but always swing around in ways to help position either better for the fight or just more cinematic. And the neuron activation in my brain when I get a huge knockdown and the entire camera zooms out for it. That's good shit, and that's only possible with weapons that feel weighty and satisfying to play. Iceborne brought even more moves for weapons, but most importantly introduced the Clutch Claw, a feature that really divides the fanbase. You either don't mind it or outright hate it. I don't see many people genuinely enjoying the Clutch Claw. I'd say for what it's worth, it's fine in the state that it is now. With the addition of the Shaver Jewel, special moves for light weapons to tenderize in one attack, and added length to a tenderize, it all comes out to not be the worst. But tenderizing is still a silly mechanic. It's the same issue Borderlands 2 had when it introduced Slag. Give a player a debuff to apply, they're always going to want to use it, so now you have to balance the monster around the constant debuff to not make the game too easy. And now we're back where we started, but with extra steps by the player. Kind of annoying. Very glad to see this has been iterated on in Wilds with wounds. And speaking of annoying, it's time to talk about the biggest problem with World. Decorations. Now personally, hot take, I don't think the decoration system is that bad in the final version of the game. We've got plenty of ways to get all the decorations we need to achieve 95% of our build. There are a host of different event quests for high and master rank to get the jewels, and also the Steamworks during events. Between all of these, I was able to complete my build in a comfortable amount of time. Sure, I don't have any Agief +4 or Attack +4 jewels, but all that would allow for is to add like 1 or 2 points of Evade Extender or a point of Part Breaker. At the point of needing +4 jewels to improve your build, you're already going to be bowling any non-endgame monster in sub 10 minutes. And all they can do for you is give just a small percentage boost in damage or comfort. I personally want to craft everything and leave the RNG to the monster parts because that just feels better, but from what I can tell in Wilds, we're going to be able to craft everything, and the only deck codes that can't be crafted and are from drops are +4 jewels. So they will be just as rare and coveted as they are in World. It just won't feel as bad getting to the grind, as we can craft 95% of our build. And don't take this as me excusing the drop rates of the base game. That was atrocious. When you have to add in event quests that just throw them out like candy, and we still are struggling to get the gems we need, there is a serious problem. Other thing that had a big problem that got fixed in patches with is guiding lands. With slow progression, no way to lure out monsters, and level gating, it was miserable. We've still only got 2 of those 3 fixes in the final game, but we'll take what we can get. Yes, you can join a friend or find a party online with the area you need, but one day this game will be offline. It'll be a long time before then, but it will come, and that grind will be awful for players. Sadly, this will also happen with event quests as well, and Actually, most modern games, as they don't fit on one disc anymore. Whenever the apocalypse hits, we're all going to be stuck with 7th generation gaming to have complete experiences. Because everything needs an day 1 patch, everything needs an update, everything needs a freaking internet connection. But anyway, in total, I freaking loved the Guiding Lands, honestly, once I figured out how it all worked. To have one big open space with all monsters and biomes was awesome. Just jump in there with a list of monsters you need or want to hunt and go at it for hours. It was obvious what Capcom was teeing up for with this location. Wilds having a connected open world maps now have a direct link to the Guiding Lands. It walked for Wilds to run. And I also loved the new grind and ability to finally layer weapons and all armors. I really don't mind the extra grind because yeah, we can still play the game for the fun of it, but I love having the sense of progression and the Guiding Lands gave that to me. And it's also got really cool lore, being spawned from the husk of a dead Zora Magdaros. It's why the bitch is so vertical, and you can even find what looks like his skull and shell throughout. The Guiding Lands is the epitome of what Capcom set out to achieve with Monster Hunter World. To create a space that you can get lost in, explore, and just hunt to your heart's content. Restocking, eating, and changing equipment at camp did a lot to fuel this continuous hunting. And now we can just cook in the freaking field. World took a massive leap forward that it feels like it skipped 2 generations to get here, and that was so exciting. With this leap came the new generation of Monster Hunter and Monster Hunter players. Capcom has been on a roll since the release of RE7 in 2017. Going from a studio struggling to find their feet to the most successful one in the industry, releasing banger after banger and taking the world by storm with Monster Hunter. It's always been one of the best games out there, but it just needed a couple small changes to explode, and Capcom finally found those tweaks to make. The little things, with gathering points being so immersive now, bugs sit on tree stumps, honey grows naturally from the walls, mushrooms sprout, and we can quickly run by and scoop them up. A proper training room with dummies in different scenarios, damage numbers. I did like that at first, but boy does it get the neurons fired. All the cute Palico animations, 16-player gathering hub, sliding down hills, no village hub split, improved item usage, joining mid-quest with SOS, infinite gathering gear, separate pouches for gear and materials, a proper hunter's notes so we don't need a wiki nearby, layered armor and weapons, and so many other little things that all come together to make this the perfect package. Now, there is no such thing as perfect, and we all know that, but what perfect truly means to me is that you're able to recognize its flaws and love something regardless of them, and maybe even because of them. Monster Hunter World is a perfect game to me, and will always be special to me. No other game has been able to touch it in quality, and when I play Wilds for the first time after uploading this video, I pray that it lives up to the incredible standards set by World. This isn't goodbye to you. This is a thank you for all the countless hours of fun and frustration you gave me. This isn't a goodbye to you. This is a love letter to Monster Hunter and to Capcom. This isn't goodbye to you, world. This is see you later.